And Lucas, if I'm correct, this is your debut feature, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, this is some amazing stuff that you and the casting crew brought to life. But I mean, this is not generally your debut kind of feature. So does that blow your mind, not only about Sundance, but the way that it's been received on the festival circuit?
Totally. I mean, we just tried to make the best thing we could, and we weren't trying to calculate like getting into Sundance. We didn't expect to get into Sundance, because I think anyone who thinks they are is delusional or arrogant. And, all I wanted to do was make the best film that I could. And I had a really great team, and I was happy with the film. But because of how controversial it is, I didn't know what, certain people would say. And it really, like, dealing with Sundance, I got to say, the programmers, like Adam Montgomery, like, they are true cinema lovers. They program based upon what they think is good.
Right.
And it was very refreshing. And that's why I would love, for more people to realize that, getting into Sundance, people think it's connections. It's not.
No.
As Kelly said, it was a blind submission. We had no connections. And, they program what they like. And they have a ton of credibility. And, it definitely opened my eyes,
Unbelievable.
That whole process.
It was funny at a pre-Sundance, prior to the festival, we were at a Sundance party here in Los Angeles, and one of the guys who had championed the film and sent it up the ladder was telling us a story about how he turned it on one night, and it's just one of these movies that he's going to watch for about half an hour of it and then know that it's not it. And he saw the first scene. He's like, nope, I'm watching this first thing tomorrow with fresh eyes.
It's funny because when I saw that Cinepocalypse, I sat back, and from the opening scene, you just couldn't let go. It hooks you almost immediately, like the Mopes are looking at that red light. You are like a moth to the flame to this film, and I'm laughing at things throughout. People are looking at me and during the screening because I'm laughing at stuff. It's like it's charismatic, and I think the casting is at the center of it. And to cast Steve and to cast Tom, I mean, to cast these two in these roles, what made them stand out in the audition?
Casting, let me just start by saying the casting director, Kelly Roy, is one of my favorite people on the planet. And
okay.
I feel like I only want to work with her when it comes to casting any movie. And I've had the good fortune of being with her on 4 projects now. So a tip of my hat to Kelly Roy. It's a very specific person that we were looking for, or actually 2 very specific people, because one, Steve is actually half black and half white.
Right.
So you have to try and find someone with the right look, but also with the right acting chops. And then, it's great to try, and Tom Dong being Asian, trying to find someone who with the acting chops. But I think the biggest part of it, the biggest difficulty that we had was finding people who were comfortable working inside of the material.
Exactly.
Now, the stigma of porn has kind of worn off, and I can let the other guys talk to this too, but it's still, porn's dirty, and a lot of people just, they think, Lucas, we probably heard this about 50 times from people. I love the script. I want to be in it. I just can't.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why casting took so long. Casting took almost a year and a half to find the right person. And my hat's off to Lucas for we had the money, we were ready to go, and I kind of pressured him. I'm like, well, let's just, I like this guy a lot. Let's shoot. And Lucas stood fast in not wanting to settle for someone who will just be in the movie. He waited till he found the exact right, or who he thought was the exact right person, who ended up being Nathan. And once you see the movie, I think that can't argue that Nathan did an amazing job, and Lucas's instincts were correct.
Lucas talked to it with Nathan, with Kelly playing, you know, the Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker of porn.
So this was the casting was basically 90% of my focus on the film, because I was kept up at night with nightmares about the casting choices, like, until I found the people I liked. Like, we read a lot of people, and when I first saw Nathan, he speaks with a British accent. He's very, very different in person, and we read him, and he was great. And then, you know, he had to develop an accent before shooting. So I really didn't know. For something deep inside me, I just knew he would be good. And he's done amazing work in other shows, but I just somehow knew. I just had this feeling. And so we really didn't see exactly what he was going to do until days before the shoot. And Kelly Fry was off a read. And he was always calm. And some of the other actors, like Brian Husky, you know, in casting limited film, there's no reads. It's just instinctual casting. So Brian Husky, I didn't know what he was going to do until he showed up.
Wow.
But I was not worried.
Well, Brian Max, David Arquette also, as well as Clayton, even to a certain extent. I mean, they have backgrounds in comedy. I mean, is that an element that was not thought of going into this, or was that an element that you looked for, Lucas, with the casting of these key characters that are put around Steve and Tom in the film?
Totally. I definitely towards guys with a comedy background, just because I felt like whenever some of the stuff Eric does is so dark, that it kind of needs to be a little bit of humor in it, or I think it's just too dark. And not to say we weren't considering dramatic actors for those roles, but when I saw Brian Husky, I was like, oh, I love his work in other stuff. And these are all guys that I've seen. Like, I've seen Max Adler. I had no doubt these guys could do it. And so I met with them, and I was like, look, this is what we're doing, and they got it. And it's the same thing with Arquette. Like, I had no concerns that Arquette couldn't do the role. Like, having David do like a heightened performance, like, that's what he does.
Oh God, he's
so
so
it was
good.
Easy. And Clayton was great. I actually had to read on. He did tape, and so I knew exactly what he was going to do. And so he was great.
I was going to say, Kern, you know, looking at these performances and, you know, being someone who has directed a rogues gallery of characters and performers before, I mean, they come in with, especially, and I'll go to Eric's character, playing that father figure in there. It's so touching at times, and yet so heartbreaking, and yet so funny. I mean, the performances, I mean, what was it like to get a hold of them in post and be able to shape them after what we've seen in front of the camera?
Well, it was great. I mean, I was on set every day too. You know, I had a myriad of different jobs. Like, I was DIT as well. So when I wasn't like downloading the footage, I was behind camera with Luke, and, you know, sometimes he'd turn to me and say, hey, what do you think? And I'd offer my opinions and suggestions. Sometimes, you know, I'd say, why don't you tell him this? And, you know, and see if that will get you what you want. And so it really it was an interesting synergy. And so I was there the whole time, kind of watching the performances unfold. So I knew what I was going to be working with when we got to the editing room. There's a lot that you see, you know, I think anyone who's made a movie, knows that the camera picks up a lot more than what you notice in real life. And especially when it's blown up bigger, and you can actually look at the fine subtleties of what everyone's doing. And I, you know, like, again, the MO was realism here. And, from the photography on down, it wouldn't be the movie that it is if we didn't get those people. I can definitely say that. I think there were a couple other options in casting that we had been looking at for a couple of the guys. And we kind of all, in retrospect, you know, we all kind of agreed, you know, hey, if we gotten so-and-so, it would have been a completely different movie. And I don't know if it would work as well. So it was really, a joy to work with so many talented people, and to really, have a lot of options in the editing room. Because it's not that they would go off on different tangents and all that stuff, but, I think a lot of what we did was more about getting different gradations of the flavor that we were looking for, instead of, like when you're, especially your first feature,
right?
If you don't cast it properly, you're spending a lot of time and energy trying to pull a performance out of somebody, and I don't think that really, Luke didn't really have to pull very hard to get gold out of these people. They all brought their A game, and they were all really into it, invested, and it just really crackles because of them, and I think one of the best parts of it is the bond that Steve and Tom have in the movie. I mean, you really believe that they are best buddies. That if you don't believe that, it doesn't work. So they really brought that empathy to it. And it was really just all felt very natural.
Lucas, how did you build that chemistry between Kelly and Nathan?
So they were really the only ones that I rehearsed with. And so up until about, we probably started 2 or 3 weeks before shooting, we started hanging out, like just doing stuff. I took them to the set, the Bukkake set. And that's quite a...
Let's have lunch afterwards, folks. Let's go to,
Yeah, we didn't have lunch. We went home, and everybody drove in silence. We had a rehearsal space, and I just kind of started running scenes with them. And they're both such like lovely human beings that it was just very easy. It's they're just like Nathan is like I'm so, for both these guys, I'm excited for what they do. Nathan just got cast in Candyman, in a pretty big role, and the same thing's going to happen to Kelly. It's like these guys, there's something special about them, but also the things that I could tell right away, they're fearless because I took them to a set and they trusted me. And there's a lot of actors that would have been weirded out by going to like a Bukkake set, and they didn't. They were totally committed. They went and met some of the real people on their own. Like they really dug in.
Didn't Kelly even grab a camera and start shooting?
Yeah. we went to one of their shoots, Eric Dover shoots, and Eric, the funny thing about Eric shoots is that he puts the camera on a tripod and acts in it.
Right.
So he's like running around, like changing the angle, then he gets back into the scene and starts banging the girl, but like, or getting kicked in the balls or whatever he's doing. But tries and camera for a little bit of the scene, and I thought it was hilarious because
that's when you knew it was going to work.
Yeah. Well, my main reason was that I really wanted them to know the subtle little things that how these guys behave. And a lot of that's the casual, detached like approach they have towards things that most people, civilians, we call them, I think are, perverted or whatever. They just don't see it that way. It's a job to them. So much so to the point that Nathan told me that like when he was in a grocery store, he almost started like rubbing his crotch because that's what these guys do every second.
Well, we see him pull out the monster hands, at least in the supermarket. Yeah. So that's something that Nathan does incredibly, and that's embracing the different quirks and playing it so serious. I mean, there's also a lot of stereotypes in this film. And I had brought up before, the Jackie Chan, Chris Tucker of the porn industry. Yeah. They were seen as something to sell to the general public, and you see that with the aspect of the character of Rocket when they meet Rocket, who's played by David Arquette, and with Eric as he's trying to find a place for them. Beyond what their stereotypes are. He's Asian. Well, he's great at technology. He's great at computers. He's black. Well, he must have a big dick. Those different quirks between the monster hands and the sword and the hygiene that all play into it. And it's not, it's not just fantastical porn world. It's these characters. And as Kern, as you brought up, the aspect of the dynamic of those two coming together, because the first act is really coming together, but the second act is really the selling point of their relationship, because everything that goes up must come down, and that's where the tragedy really starts. And one of the things in the third act that's so powerful, and Kelly, I'll throw it over to you, and because you talked about it at Cinepocalypse, was getting the father's insight and what it was like for in real life with the aspects of Steve's father and his insight that he gave and talking about it. Can you talk to that?
Boy, I don't even know how to explain this. It was pretty surreal to meet Steve's father, and Lucas had met him long before I did. But to have someone who will come and openly talk about something so tragic and kind of embrace the fact that that we're doing this. We're making a movie about his son who had died in such a horrific way.
Right.
Again, what Kern said, we're trying to stay true to the truth, and having Steve's dad be a part of it, I think helped us keep that realism on the screen, basically because you get a completely different side of it. Now, the way that Steve was open with his father about what he was doing,
right.
I think that's another layer of Steve Driver that, you know, I'm not open with my father about, you know, the kind of dark sides of my life, and I don't know if anyone really is. But yeah, having his dad there, and then Dave Hill being at the premiere at Sundance and kind of being touched and saying things to all of us about how we did such a great job portraying his son, that lent a little credence to what we were doing as well. Like, you know, I for one know that I was a little nervous about how he was going to take the movie as a whole.
Right.
Not necessarily his role, but just the whole thing, because this has got to be hard to watch. You know, one of your children does something like this, but the fact that he was moved the way that he was, I think is a testament to how Lucas, you know, stuck to the story and made it right.
That's a common thread throughout the film, on him getting his father's acceptance and saying that, you know, Dad, you're going to be proud of me. You know, this is something you can invest in. And it's so normal for him. And again, but that's going to be a question I have also is, why there is no pre-story, why there is no really talking. It's only given in little hints about Steve's past, and why those clips at the end rather than splicing them in. But we'll get to that. Lucas, go ahead.
Can I jump in here real quick
before
please. We move on from this? Because I think what Kelly was saying about Steve's dad, I think was the trippiest part that I think about the whole thing, is that Steve's dad said that Steve would have loved the movie.
Uh-huh.
And I think what's so crazy about it is that it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Like, this movie is in some ways the ultimate end goal for Steve Driver. And just thinking about how that kind of plays into what, you know, like it's just so weird and ironic that, you know, that now we're here with this movie, and that his story is being told on a broader scale to people that probably would never have heard of him otherwise. But that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted people to know about him. He wanted the fame, you know, and that his dad said he would have loved the movie. It really floored me.
Wow. Lucas, go ahead.
I first talked to his dad when I was just starting the process of writing the script. So our dynamic goes back years. I mean, I've probably like hundreds of emails. I've met him probably 5 or 10 times when he came to LA. So he really, you know, trust was gained over a period of time. And he, you know, I showed him that I was, you know, intent on the project. And also I wanted to hear his perspective about like trying to help Steven. Like he did all kinds of things to try to help him.
Right.
But there's no system in place for somebody like him who is not, you can't be committed.
Right.
But he's not normal.
Oh, yes.
So he's in this middle ground. And so one of the things that is kind of, it's not even hinted in the movie because it's kind of a different story, is that he came dangerously close to doing an attack at the University of Northridge.
Right.
Like, he told his dad that he was actually going to shoot at the campus. And so his dad called the cops. And on the way there, the cops stopped him. He didn't have any guns in his car, just like some swords. But they did. But so what ended up happening is that this is a couple years before the murder, and he didn't, like, he could have been helped at that point. And so there's so much more to this guy's story. I mean, it's, you know, you could do a whole like 3-part documentary about him.
But why was that not included, though? Was that included in the initial stages and edited out, or was it not thought of to be part of it, Lucas?
It was kind of in the early draft of the script, but the story, the movie, I wanted it to be about like what Tom and Eric and everybody would see when they first met Steve.
Okay.
Like, that's how that's how he was able to get into their world, was when they first met him. He'd make the same thing if you met him. You would think of him as a weird guy with an offbeat personality, but he's certainly not dangerous. And I think that, I'm not like a giant fan of lots of backstory. I think that I like having, it's okay with me if people want to go research a story more, but I wanted to focus it specifically on this incident because, there's so much in this part of his life. And a lot of the stuff is very murky. It's, you hear references to it, but there's his upbringing was so crazy too.
Wow.
And there's all these things there's things that I don't have answers to, like his sexuality, stuff like that.
Right. As we see at the end of the film, and, I'll throw it to whoever would like to answer this, the aspect of the real life footage. I mean, that really punctuates what's happened there, and then you deal with the aspect of the video box cover. But I mean, to see what really happened and to give kind of a perspective on it, that this really was the truth. This was not fantastical. This wasn't creative license. This was what was going on, all the way down, as you had brought up, Lucas, to the actual suicide note and the lines that were there, which is so powerful and so terrifying because you've invested so much in this character, and now he's gone and Tom's gone. I mean, it's terrifying. But why the footage at the end? Was that necessary to be able to push this story forward?
I think so, because it was written into the script.
Right.
I felt like, it's and this has happened in screenings. Like it says in the very beginning of the movie, this is a true story.
Right.
But a lot of viewers just don't really, like they're kind of half paying attention at the beginning of the movie. And I felt that you should understand that, like, by the end of the movie, this happened. And that's the reason to look at it differently. Because I think you can take something differently when you know something is real. Because it's, I think it's just a different experience. And I also thought it was, and I'm sure Kern will agree, I thought it was also the most powerful way to depict that moment.
Yeah, we had discussed doing it like recreating the fall and recreating, doing it more in a more cinematic way. But I think, the conversation always came back to, staying true to the truth. And there's nothing more true than the real footage that we had. We knew we were going to match that when we went to shoot it. And it lends a lot of credibility to the entire thing. And I think if you don't have that there, I mean, I think there's, there is a debate over the ethical,
right.
The ethics of doing the real footage. But I think if you don't have that there, like Luke said, like a lot of people might misconstrue what we were doing with the ending. And
yeah, it is. And I mean, there's a lot of questions. And Kelly, I'll throw it over to you, because during that Q&A, there was one of the critics that were still there that wanted to know how many breast to dick ratios there were when it came to it. It was like, and I understand what she's saying, and I get why, but there's a lot of questions with this film. And again, not only does it build a conversation, but it also challenges the audience to not only, stay with the story and stay with these characters and go for the ride, but also the aspect of challenging who you are and what you believe in. I mean, the story really has a lot of universal connections, Kelly, and I think that's one of the things that really endears it to the aspect of the film festival circuit, because all these different festivals, from Sundance, the Buff, to Cinepocalypse, to the Ukraine, and more coming up. I mean, it's so many different audiences seeing it and taking it in.